Hi, welcome to Godshots. I have Darlene Sperlazza with me, my co-host, and we're going to talk about spiritual awakenings today and the word surrender, the concept of surrender. And we're just going to go with the flow. And Darlene, I wanted to tell you something before I ask how you are, by the way. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How's
Hey, it's
everything?
lovely to see you. You
Great to
look
see
beautiful in
you.
pink.
You look beautiful. You look like a beautiful misty haze around you. It's so pretty.
That's the sunshine, thank you.
Yeah. And we have sunshine. We're lucky. You're on the East Coast in West Virginia, and I'm in California in Porter Ranch. So it's two
Yeah.
different sides of the country. I've been visiting a website on Facebook called Spiritual Awakening, and people keep asking questions about what is going on right now with me. Why am I so anxious all the time? Other questions are whenever I write something, trust God, they go, I don't believe in God. The word God is too scary for me. Many people are very, very frightened of the word God, and they have been raised in a fundamentalist kind of fear and punishment form of religion, or they were given a very harsh idea of God when they were young. So it's really weird. It's like sometimes I can't get them to understand that to me, my concept of God, and I've chosen my own concept in a way, is God as love, the force of infinite love. And if God is the sun, we are the rays. We express God. We're the expression of this
Yeah.
infinite love, kindness, goodness, good orderly direction, gift of desperation, God, all these acronyms.
Mhm.
What do you think? How do we answer questions like this and talk about God in a new way?
Well, I've had that experience too, and I find that for myself, um, just being authentically who I am,
Mm.
and I believe in God. That's what I choose to call my higher power is God. I have a strong belief in the word of God, which is the Bible, and I'm true to that authentic self of mine. I have no issues, no problems with any other type of literatures or readings or beliefs. But I stay true to myself. And when I stay true to myself, I find that people are drawn to that and they
Mm.
ask me questions, they ask me things. A good example, I can't believe we're talking about this because in less than 2 hours, I'm taking a young lady that's, well, she's in her 30s, so not like terribly young, but she's never been given any foundation of God in her life by her family. They had no belief. They were probably agnostic at best, and she was raised in that. There was a lot of drug running. There was a lot of darkness in the way that she was raised. And she came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and she just watched me. I guess she was just watching me come and go and come
Oh,
and
cool.
go, and eventually asked me if I would sponsor her. And so for about the past 18 months, we've been at that level of a relationship. And she called me last week and she said, would you take me to church with you?
Oh.
I'm starting to feel that I need to go deeper and understand what God is. And I just think I want to start there. And so that's just one example of how I allow people to reach their own level and I
Mm.
just walk my walk. And
Beautiful.
yeah, so that's kind of how I do it. And I understand what you're saying about people having this unrest.
Hmm.
I believe that there's unrest right now in the most faithful of people, the least faithful of people, people that have no idea what faith even means. I think we're all walking around with, there's an energy shift, Lydia. In my
Yeah.
opinion, there's a huge energy shift happening and it's leaving everybody a little bit off balance.
I think
Yeah.
we're experiencing an awakening. A lot of us are
Yes.
waking up. I had mine in 1994 when I got sober, and I had such a spectacular sequence of, I have to call them miracles, uncanny coincidences that I know were breadcrumbs on the path, showing me I'm in the right place. It was just so magical. And maybe
Yes.
I had a childlike spirit. I needed those kind of neon sign coincidences to keep me interested, in a weird way. I needed that shock and awe in the good
Yes.
way.
Hmm.
But a lot of us get, however you hear the message, it would resonate with you in the deepest levels. It would be how you most hear it. It's very
Yes.
personal, and yet
Yes.
it's universal love. but I became a happier, softer, more grateful human being. And they keep asking things like, what should I try Reiki? Should I worship crystals? Should I go to a psychic? And I'm thinking it's all one source. The answer is so clear, and it's really within you. It's within all of us. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And as I've told you many times, I don't believe in an anthropomorphic being in the sky with a long white beard casting down fear and punishment. There's no heavenly realm. It's everywhere in us now. It's the kingdom of heaven. I believe now is the time of salvation. We can have it now. Heaven can be on earth now. It's not in
Yes.
the afterlife to me, but that's just me,
Mhm.
Um,
I believe that God, the word that they use in the Bible is omnipresent,
I love that one.
which
Exactly.
means that he's everywhere all the time, you know?
Everywhere.
Yes. And so I agree. I agree with your assumption that he's with us now. We can have heaven on earth. We can bring whatever, we're a co-creator with God,
Exactly.
and so, but I find it interesting. And we were talking about surrender, like
Mhm.
that was one of the
Yeah.
words that we were going to use.
Yeah.
Well, basically, and I needed to look that up. Give me a second because I want to share this.
Mhm.
And so surrender can kind of sound good or bad, but it says to yield to the power, control, or possession of another, right? And it says, or to completely agree or forego, and to give oneself into the power of another. I like that. That's surrender, to give oneself to the power of another, right? And
Mm.
so I have no power. I'm powerless, but I
Yeah.
know who has all the power, and that is my Father, Abba
Right.
Daddy. He has all the money, he has all the power, he has all the love, he has everything. So anything that I could possibly want or need, all I need to do is ask, right? Now, here's where it becomes dichotomous to me. And I love this story. Are you familiar with Carrie Ten Boom?
Yes. Yes.
So
Wonderful.
so as you know, I mean, she was in the Holocaust. She was in a concentration camp. Her and her sister, Betsy, were both. But here's the part of that story that I want to bring home to anybody that's listening, right? That
Mhm.
was a terrible, awful situation that those people had to go through. And she was very, very young. And her
Mm.
whole family was taken to these concentration camps. And she and her sister were separated from her parents at a
Mm.
very young age. I don't remember exactly how old, but she was
Right.
very young. And that was bad enough. And then she was taken even further into this place that they locked her into, her and her sister with other people, that was flea infested. And I don't know if you've ever read the story, but lots and lots of fleas. It was infested. So the guards wouldn't even really go in to check anything because they didn't want to be in those fleas, right? And so Corrie Ten Boom had accepted Christ per her own biography at the age of 5. So by the time this was happening to her, she had a faith, but
Mhm.
that faith was being shaken. I mean, that's pretty difficult
Yeah.
to be in that situation, right? But she kept praying, she kept believing, she kept trusting that there was a better outcome. Well, what the outcome was, if you understand her story, was that she lived through that. And
Mm.
she lived through that experience because she was in that lockdown place with all the fleas where nobody would mess with her.
Right.
So God had her there, I believe, and she lived to tell her story and to go on to help hundreds of
Right.
thousands of people, right?
Mm.
And so she surrendered to that horrendous situation completely
Mm.
to God.
And oh, God, I love this story. There was a movie about her, by the way, which we should all watch one day if you haven't seen it. She surrendered in that dark, infested place. Now, how did she do that? What does that mean?
See, to me, I mean, and I'm terrible. I mean, I can talk it, I can
Hmm.
talk it, but when it comes to walking it,
Yeah,
sometimes I'm just like anybody else that's listening to this show. I'm screaming bloody murder. This
me
isn't
too.
fair. I don't want it to happen like this. I want it
Yeah.
my way. But I have found that when I kind of just, I liken it to the ocean, right?
Hmm.
When if there's a storm coming or a hurricane coming, the ocean waves become very choppy. The ocean becomes very choppy. There's what they call the riptide, and it can be extremely dangerous
Mhm.
to get out into those waters because they're ravaging and they can hurt you, they can kill you, you can drown, right?
Right.
Unless you get below the waves and you get on the floor of the ocean and then it's peaceful and calm, right? And
Exactly.
so that's kind of how surrender, like that's how I feel about surrender. It's just like let go,
Ooh, sorry.
let go and let God. Just let go and get out of the chop, get out of the riptide, and just you're gonna think you're gonna drown because you're sitting on the bottom of the ocean, but actually you're saving yourself because that's where the calm waters are.
I love it.
And so that's kind of how I look at surrender is just letting go, letting go.
It's
It's not
and
easy.
the letting go process is so hard. Resisting anything that's happening in the moment, resisting is where all the pain starts. It's
Yes.
like acceptance is the key to serenity, as we learned in the 12 steps. And I love that prayer, or many of us learned it earlier. But whenever I'm fighting what's going on, that's when
Yeah.
I'm in agony. And I have had such trouble going, wait a minute, show me, show me the gift in this. Maybe something cool is around the corner if I just let go of my resistance. And I have to literally ask the universe, God, I call God, and pray to surrender. I have to pray for the willingness to let
Yes.
go of my self-will. My self-will run riot.
Yes.
And then when I actually go, hey, show me what surprised me. Show me what the next thing is. Like you had that experience with letting go of your desire to have, your plans with your son's birthday. And then you were led to
Yes.
go help save someone's life. I mean, there's so many cool things around the corner. My plans are never as good as God's plans.
Correct.
And it's always better when I let go of my ego and my self-will, you know?
So let me ask you a question, Lydia. You say the word ego. What does that mean to you? Explain that to me from your
An
perspective.
acronym that I love is EGO, EGO, edging God out or edging good out. It's when I'm prideful, I'm self-centered, I want to look good. And I'm having struggles myself with as a woman my age. I'm a lot older than I look because I work on that, but I also feel that in my industry, I have to look a certain way and have to stay young. But the truth is, it's a spiritual process. We're so into pasting on the makeup and the wrinkle removers and all the things that make us feel pretty and young, but what do we want from that? We want sexuality, we want approval, we want people to like us, we want to fit into society's standards. And truly, it's not authentic. Like you said, being authentic is where you find your soul. That's where you find the purpose in life. And I really feel like I'm almost done with it already. My ego has been in the way many years. I
Yeah.
even on Facebook and Twitter, I can't seem to break the social media addiction because I want people to either like me or I want them to be uplifted by something I say, but I'm not that powerful. And I'm much happier when I'm letting go of my desperate ambition and my need to be perfect. And I really was raised by a mother she was incredibly perfectionistic. I literally couldn't go out of the house without white gloves, every hair in place. I was a little girl in Texas. And my mother she was punished by that same pride of ego as well and perfectionism because as a little girl, her family could have told her, you're not worth anything, the boys are, but you're not. And her mother locked her in a closet for days on end. And I have to look at, wow, we're all coming from some place where our deepest wounds define us. But the truth is, and we look for people who are wound mates. There's a beautiful woman named Carolyn Mace, Myss. She
Yes.
writes about wound mates and how we always seek the people that we can either join a mutual hate society where we can all hate the same political person or hate the same tribe and feel like we belong to a tribe that defines our ego. And that's based on these hollow mechanisms. Even in show business, it was all about how I looked. I was a sex symbol in the 80s, and I'm driven so much by, one time I saw a comment on Facebook where a guy said, you certainly don't look as good as you did in the 80s. And I went, so I worked really hard on trying to look as good as I did in the 80s. That is really hollow. You can't spend any more time on trying to please some stranger in a dark room. So we've got to let go of approval seeking. And to me, that's what ego is. It's wanting material approval. But the material world is temporal. And the
Mhm.
eternal spiritual world is everything else that's invisible. Joy. You can't capture joy in a bottle. I mean, you can see the sunshine and call that, it invokes joy when you see a baby's face or something beautiful in nature, but we can't, you think about it, all the great things are invisible. Thoughts, joy, happiness, love. How do you paint a picture of love? You know,
But we can feel love.
you can feel it. And
Mhm.
that's the spiritual realm. And
Yeah.
Ralph Waldo Emerson said, there's nothing greater than the spiritual realm. Thoughts make the man. The spiritual is bigger than any material force.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And see, our society has it so backwards
Mm-hmm.
because at least the way I see it and the way that I've been in my own life for a long time was trying to amass. The more cars I had, the bigger my house was,
Yeah.
that was going to make me happy. But I kept falling short. It was like, as you know, I have a doctorate, and I thought, so I go to school and I get an associate's degree. Well, I'll be better if I have a bachelor's, and then it'll be better if I have a master's, and I'll have arrived when I get the doctorate. And it was really awesome to be on the stage graduating at the University of Alabama. It was a wonderful experience. But you know what? I realized right then and there that it didn't change who I was, what I was, where I was going. It was just another piece of paper. So all these things we aspire to don't give us that feeling, but I can tell you when I get it, and that's when I'm helping others.
Oh gosh, me too.
Yeah, it's not about me. It's about when I'm giving it away, I keep it, you know?
Exactly. That's what we've learned in sobriety.
Yeah.
And I also want to do a show one day with you on recovery Godshots, because that's where I hear the most of these incredible coincidences. I was at a meeting the other day and I was thinking, wow, everyone in this room is so happy on Zoom
Mhm.
all over the world. There's a meeting in Israel right now. There's a meeting in Moscow I attended last week.
Right.
Um, People in those rooms are happy because they're so focused on the now, not the regret of the past or the future worry. They're right there. There's some force in those AA meetings, which is love in action. And if you don't want to use the word God, it's so wonderful because they give you your chance to use whatever concept you want of your higher power for people
Yes.
who are really scared of religion. And I use the word God because I love the word God. It just, God shots reminds me of the ultimate miraculous, magical wonder. And
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder if it's okay to be that excited about seeking God. To me, it's because I came from such a life of pain that seeking this answer is a constant thrill. It's an adventure of discovery. Other people don't understand that. They're mundane about it because they haven't had the desperate need. It's like being on a shipwreck in the Titanic and you're rescued and you want to share it with the world. That's what happened to
Right.
me.
Right.
But in meetings, I wonder, I think it's like the best church in the world because there's a constant resurrection of the spirit in those rooms. People have come from
Absolutely.
death to life again, literal
Yeah.
death, you know?
Yes. Yes. And there's a saying in the Bible, and I don't know exactly where, but it talks about becoming a new person, a new
Yeah,
creature, right? And that's exactly what happened to me. I was the alcoholic drinking person, and now I'm the sober recovering person.
yeah.
Two different people.
I know.
Acts two different, entirely different ways.
It's unbelievable.
And I like this version of me better. And we're becoming different versions every single day.
Oh,
And I
exactly.
heard something really great in a meeting yesterday morning. And it was this: we can't ever just rest on our laurels. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. Nobody stands still, nobody's stagnant. And so that gives me a lot of hope when I think about, well, hope and despair.
Yeah,
But when I think about the hope part, it's like when I'm really, really down and out, which we will all be,
yeah,
it ebbs and flows, right?
yeah,
Then that it'll come back up, right? But
yeah.
then whenever you're having that mountaintop experience that you don't want to stop, you also know that you'll go back to status quo also. So that's how come I never try to get too invested in the highs
Wow, very
and,
good.
and too depressed in the lows, because all of it, this too shall pass.
The Buddhists have a great motto of no attachment. Like, don't stay attached to either praise or blame, because you're right. It's a fluid life. We're constantly flowing and progressing into a new moment. And we
Yeah.
don't know, and we can't let that kill us. A lot of people make a permanent decision on a temporary feeling. Like they
Yeah.
will, you know, commit suicide based
Yes.
on a bad mood one day, or a desperate need, or a hunger. And I feel so bad for people that don't wait for the miracle, like my little brother. I
Oh,
just have to explain my first surrender. I've told you this before. I've never told my entire sobriety story on this show yet, but a piece of it is I'll never forget that first meeting I walked into after being at my wit's end for years. Oh, by the way, when I got sober, and I didn't have a concept of the biblical form of God, I was sort of aware of it. I wasn't ever invested in the Bible, but when I went back after I got sober, I was so shocked and so amazed at all the miracles I had, that I wanted to find out what they were. And I started reading the Bible again. And there's a great quote, of myself, I can do nothing.
mm.
The Father just does the work. Do you know what that's from? What scripture? Of
I, d-
myself, I
well,
can.
I can look it up, but
Yeah. Anyway, Christ says it, I think. Of myself, I can do nothing. The Father does the work. But so
yes.
here's what happened on my first AA meeting. I wandered into the meeting. To this day, I don't know how I got there. I was completely in that incomprehensible demoralization at the very end, at my bottom. I had been driving around trying to get drunk for 3 days with my baby in the car. I'd gone to people's houses and barbecues, sneaking liquor in their homes. And I'm telling this to people who might be normies, but normal people who aren't sober. But at the end of your drinking career, you often hit this terrible bottom. For me, it was my worst few days of my life. And I couldn't get any fix. Nothing would fix me in the outside world. Um, I had tried so much liquor that I didn't even get drunk anymore. I was puffed up like a blowfish. I looked like an idiot, and I was hiding behind sunglasses and a hat, and I was trying to hold it together. And it felt like there's got to be a solution to this. This was the end for me. And I floated into this meeting in Beverly Hills in the Good Shepherd Church. And there was this room of cheerful, happy women. And there was someone at the podium, and the speaker said this as I wandered in this room. If you've wandered into this room and you don't know you're an alcoholic, let's put it this way: virgins don't take pregnancy tests. And the whole room roared with laughter. And there was a smell of cinnamon pastries in the air and coffee brewing and laughter. And I'm like, these aren't homeless drunks. These aren't people at the bottom of the barrel. These are happy people. What is their secret? And at that moment, they ask, are there any alcoholics present? And my hand shot up without my permission. And I just cried. Like 20 years of hell came off me like a river of tears. And I felt unburdened, lighter. That was my first surrender, admitting out loud that I had a problem. And I didn't know what God was yet, or I didn't understand what this seeking would entail, but it was so beautiful and catastrophic. My miracles that day, my God shot that day, is something that I don't rest on that laurel, but I remember it and I go, oh, you knew back then that there was this amazing life that you could have, and that miracles actually happen. I call a miracle a natural law. It's not where nature is set aside for some outrageous thing. It's a natural law of life, but we just don't take the blinders off to see it. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
that
I
first
do. Like,
day
that's a
I had
beautiful
my big.
story. That's a great story. Like, to come in like that. And mine was something very similar,
Mm-hmm.
coming into the rooms and not wanting to be there, not knowing why I was there, and just knowing that every single person I was hearing speak, it was like speaking to my heart, and it was just kind of making me nervous. I'm like, why am I understanding this? And
Yeah.
then I never looked back. I never looked back. I didn't know one person in that place. I met them all. We became friends, but there was something about it that I felt like I was home. And
Yeah.
somehow intuitively, I knew it was either stay or something bad was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
It was almost like I knew it was time. It was my time. And so I've never looked back, you know.
Interesting how we're guided back to the source. You can call God source, the source of life, love, truth, being. Um, Everyone has that feeling deep inside. I want to read the chapter We Agnostics one day on this show. I can read it off the screen. And there's a great meeting I go to called The Great Reality, where it says it may be obscured by calamity, by circumstance, by years of hell, but deep down inside every human being is the fundamental idea of God, love at your core.
Yes.
We've all felt happy at one time and we don't know where it comes from. We've all been able to forgive someone we hate. We don't know where that comes from. It's not humanly possible with just our massive cells and organs and blood and bones. Where does the thought come from to do the right thing when you're not in the mood, or to get up and help someone when your lower nature is the selfish gene? There's a book called The Selfish Gene, and that's what survival of the fittest is all about. There's a component called love that's missing from that. And I believe that component of love is what Darwin and Einstein were eventually going to prove makes humans higher than animals, that we're able to have the moral compass to step out of our own self-centered fear and just help someone.
Exactly. And that's the purpose of actually doing this show.
Yeah.
Is hoping that somebody can hear it and relate to it and look at this and say, I want to understand this a little bit better. I would like to hear more, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's my goal, is to talk about Godshots all over the entire world, because we are all connected. All of us are connected. It doesn't matter our skin color. It doesn't matter what country we live in. It doesn't matter how we were raised. We're all connected through that thread of love.
We
And
are.
it's an amazing journey when you really start to see how small the world truly is. Because, you know, it tells us we are made in God's image. All of us are made in God's image, you know?
No judgment, no fear, and he can change Moses killed a man. I mean, the very next day after he was redeemed, he was brought back, he had remorse. I mean, he was used by God. But I'm saying we all have the chance every moment, even if we do something bad today, to be okay in the next moment or tomorrow. We could actually change our life. We don't have to give up. Nothing's fatal. Nothing is the end.
That's right. And, you know, we all say, I think, like, probably I would venture to say that probably 98% of our viewers have heard of or said the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Right. And in that prayer, it says, forgive us our trespasses or our transgressions as we forgive those that trespass against us. That's when you really think about that. That's a huge mouthful. So how do you get to that? I believe you get to that through surrender. You have to surrender and just allow God to take you through that process, because God is the ultimate healer. He is the ultimate physician.
Right, exactly. That's the key. Okay, this is interesting. When you say surrender, people think raise a white flag and give up your will. No, you're giving up the fight. The fight that made you so unhappy. The fighting reality. It's like resisting what is. When you give up that fight, it's like, oh my God, then you allow your heart to open and the solution comes. Almost inevitably, people have had the experience of trying too hard to make something work, and then they walk away from the problem and it fixes itself. Almost everyone's, it's almost like a watched pot never boils.
Yes.
But the word surrender is so interesting. I really believe that if you can get yourself to a point of being willing to act as if there's a power greater than yourself that loves you, a loving power that is sustaining this beautiful universe, it's creative, endlessly creative, and just say, you know what, I give up. I can't figure it out myself. I'm going to just be willing to believe your problem is halfway there being taken care of. It's like, that's the surrender part.
I love that.
Yeah. Most people don't know how to give up that. They don't know how the alchemy or that technical part of praying and letting it go. How do you let it go when you're in a brain loop? of
Yes.
anxiety in the
How do
world.
you let it go when you're in a brain, Lydia? What do you do?
I pray. I get on, and prayer to me is the invisible transfer of love to myself and to another, and to put love on the situation. And it's, I literally have to ask the universe, God, help me. I can't do this alone. And when I go to a meeting, I almost inevitably find the solution because it's a joint effort. Where
Yes.
two or more are gathered in my name, there I am. We're here to help each other. Life is a circle. The earth is round for more than one reason. You know, we're all connected.
Yes.
We're not
That's really
separate.
awesome. Yes.
And this all sounds like semantics, but in my first AA meeting, after that moment of surrender, here's the God shot. And I've told you this before, but a God shot is an uncanny coincidence where it seems too beautiful to be random, a meaningful coincidence. And Carl Jung did a whole book called Synchronicity. He created the word synchronicity to define coincidences that were too bizarre. And he had patients and psychiatrists where they would have strange coincidences, and he wanted to prove the mathematical probability of these. So we went through a whole mathematical trying to figure out what it was. And he ultimately came to the idea that there are laws in the universe of goodness, truth, and beauty, the way Einstein came up with. Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And that's a scientific definition of God, God as love, beauty, truth, synonyms for goodness, without all the biblical interpretations. So my first AA meeting, after I surrendered, a woman says, and no one knew my problems or my story about my mother. I had a very difficult childhood, and my mother was extremely, we never knew she was bipolar till 3 or 4 years ago, actually. She's 92 now, and God bless her. But at my first meeting, no one knew my true story, and I'd had never-ending fights with my mother over everything on earth, but mainly that she gave away my Barbie dolls when I went to college. She gave away my original Barbie, Ken and Midge, the Dream House, all these beautiful dolls. I'd hidden them in the attic. And I went away to college and I said, Mother, whatever you do, never give these away. And she gave them away immediately. And it was like she had never cared about my feelings. And right before I went into that first AA meeting, Barbie was in the news. There was going to be a Barbie musical. Vintage Barbie skyrocketed in value. I kept twisting that knife in her, metaphorically. I'll never forgive her. I could never forgive my mother for that. Giving away my Barbies, right? And we
Yeah.
even had a fight about it that week. And she kept begging my forgiveness. And she had so many deep psychological problems I didn't really want to know about. But at that first meeting, after I surrendered that day, a woman took me home to sit in the garden and talk. And out of the blue, not knowing anything about my story, she said this to me, out of the blue: Lydia, you're going to overcome every problem and every resentment you ever had in this program. For example, my mother, I overcame a lifelong resentment against my mother for giving away my Barbies. And I had chills down my spine. I said to her, am I on a hidden camera show? Is this a joke? What would make you say that? Why'd you say that to me? And I felt like my whole life was off track, and I was suddenly snapped into divine alignment. And that
Cool.
was my first God shot. And I had hundreds of those after that first year. I've never had a craving to drink since that first day, surrendering. So I'm just saying, we don't know how it works, but there is some force greater than us that loves us enough to put these magical, beautiful things in our life. And I've had so many. Yeah.
And so that's what's really awesome it's just like all the other people out there that have these God shots. I mean, come forward, come be on the show, come talk with us. It gets very exciting when you're
Yeah.
talking to like-minded people about these kind of events, because at first, I mean, I felt like I was looking over my shoulder, like something would happen and I'd be like, did that just happen? Like, am I making this up? And I'd rub my contacts a little bit and be like, am I seeing this right? I mean, and then it gets really fun. And here's something that one of my sponsees, which the girl that wants to go to church this evening, I don't know, it was maybe a couple months ago, and she called me and she's like, I realize we talk about, steps in the big book. She goes, but I think you might be able to answer this question because you go to a Catholic church. Is that right? And I said, well, that's the church I go to. And I don't put, and please understand if you're listening, I don't put religiosity above spirituality at all, at
Right.
all. It's just a place I go where I find comfort and peace in the
Right.
Catholic Church. That's where I go. So I said, yes. And she goes, well, what can you tell me about Mary? Now, here's somebody that doesn't have a religious background at all.
Mhm.
And I said, you mean the Blessed Mother? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, wow. So I gave her a couple different websites to look at and some things, but here was the great God shot for her. It's been very cold back here where we're at, lots of snow, lots of ice, lots of cold weather. And a couple weeks ago, she went hiking in the park. And in this park is like this little cave called Mineral Springs. So there's spring water, there's a little cave. It's really a beautiful walk, but it was
Mhm.
extremely cold. And she noticed like 100 little icicles forming on the ridge of this cave, right?
Mm.
But the amazing thing was the way the light was hitting it, it looked like little crystal statues of Mary, right? And her girlfriend was with her, and she looked at her girlfriend. She goes, "What does this look like to you?" She goes, "It looks like the Blessed Mother." Well, how cool is that to see 100 little ice figurines?
So cute.
And that to me, that's a God shot.
Totally. It's
You
so
know,
it's so precious the way it comes to us. However, we most will be delighted with it. That's
yeah,
what's so cool. Be open to these things. I love that story.
yeah. She was tickled pink. She called me and she was just like, "You're not gonna believe this. You're probably not gonna believe this." But she goes, "I saw 100 little Mary icicles today." I'm like, "What?" But
Oh my God.
I actually got like very excited for her, kind of jealous because it's like I miss having those. Like when you're new, when
Oh
you're
yeah.
coming into
Oh
this and
yeah.
they're new, you just get a ton of them,
Oh
right?
yeah. Totally. What
And
is that? Why did we get the? I had so many that for 5 years I was
yes,
on a pink cloud of joy and wonder. And ooh, there's another one. And I've written them all down. Thank
yes.
God I recorded all of them. But you're right. Then we sort of get the mundane, the life gets in the way, and we forget. We forget to look for them. We forget to believe in them. What is that?
Well, I think what I forget most of all, and I was just thinking about this, I forget to be grateful. When I first came into the program of AA, I was so grateful that I didn't pick up a drink for
Oh,
one day. I was so grateful that I didn't wake up with a hangover. I was so grateful that I had not destroyed my life. I was so grateful that my kids still talk to me. I was grateful about the dumbest things.
you are so right.
And I met a woman my very first week in AA, and she scared me. And I had a hard time getting close to talking to her. She only had one arm.
Mhm.
So, she'd come to the meeting and her arm was gone from here down. And I never wanted to ask. I was just always kind of afraid because I thought, wow, I wonder what happened to her. I'm afraid to ask her. I'm afraid to talk to her. Is it contagious? I mean, it was just weird things I was thinking, right? And so then one day she told me her story. Here's her story. She was sober for 4 years, right?
Mhm.
And it was a beautiful summer day, like 80 degrees. She had a Jeep. She had the top off of it. She was going for a ride back in the country roads, and she thought that drinking a beer would be okay.
Oh my God.
So she had three. Those three beers caused her to go off the berm of the road, flip the Jeep, and it cut her arm off
Oh.
in the roll. And so those relapse stories, those kind of stories, I just want to keep my seat because it was a gift from God to
Right.
get that seat.
Right.
I want to stay and I want to be grateful every day, no matter how this external world looks,
Mm.
because on some days it can look pretty crappy, right?
Mm.
And I want to change it. But what I need to do is just be thankful, be grateful, give God all the praise and thanks for even me breathing without a respirator. These poor people in COVID right now.
Oh my
I
God.
mean, we need to pray for them. Their life has changed like that. And ours can, right?
Exactly.
So when I have to surrender to the fact that, okay, I'm not going to get to go to Myrtle Beach next week like I wanted to do. And my
Mhm.
claws are out because am I stuck in this cold one more week, right? Be grateful that I can get in my car and drive, and I can see to drive, and I can breathe. Doesn't get much better than that, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mm.
The bottom needs are air,
Oh,
right?
wow. Yes,
So if you're
exactly.
breathing, you have a shot of eating, of being successful, of reaching the God shots. But if you can't breathe, you're going to struggle. So that's where I start. It's just, I need to be thankful and grateful.
God, you are so right. And today somebody asked a question on that Spiritual Awakening site going, I'm struggling with staying in the now. And I wrote immediately out of my heart, gratitude. Like you just said, gratitude gets me there faster than anything. And that is the sincerest form of prayer, gratitude. And I immediately go, I'm grateful for the crack in my plate, the baby smile on a baby's face, the sun shining today, the fact that I can breathe, the fact that I'm alive. I mean, come on, it's a gift. And I'm here, and I can touch, feel, hear, see my eyesight. Many people don't have their eyesight. And just that immediately brings me back to the now, because as we always say, worry and regret don't really exist. They're in our head.
Right.
If you have 1 foot in tomorrow, 1 foot in yesterday, you're pissing on today. I keep saying that.
That's true. That's true. But you know what? We're human, and that human nature is bent towards always wanting more, always wanting bigger, better, more. And then you get it. And then what do you want? You want bigger, better, more.
You want more.
You want more.
The funny thing is, if you really stay in the now, right now, here and now, if you're really focused on what you're doing creatively or even work-wise, if you notice, time expands. You're not aging, you're not suffering. It's like in the moment of now, everything going on is beautiful, productive, and creative. It's only when we're worrying about that, when we're outside of the now. So whatever is not in the now isn't real. We just have to hone ourselves. Meditation really helps, like we said, prayer and meditation.
That's correct.
But I love your spirit. You have such a beautiful way of talking about God and the Bible, and also I love talking in the future shows. I want to talk about Wayne Dyer and a book I love called Conversations with God.
Okay.
Which, have you ever read that book?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's a great book. He sold millions and millions of copies.
Who's the author of that book?
Neil Donald Walsh. It's a
Okay.
bit new age, in the category of new age, except that it's for people who really are scared of the word God in a religious sense. And it simply is, he sat down one day and he said, I'm going to ask God some questions, and if God exists, I want to hear the answers through my pen. And he wrote questions, and out came answers, and they all resonate so deeply with so many of us that we know this is what the great creative force of love in the universe really does mean. So
That's awesome.
I think we are still writing the Bible, all of us it shouldn't have ended 2,000 years ago. We're still writing the stories as our lives go on of God's work in this world, Shouldn't be shrined in some holy thing like that was then. And Jesus didn't say just heal then. He said we should all be healing.
Yes, absolutely.
The living water.
That's right. And see, when you say, and the living water, the living word, right? It's called the living word. And why is it called living word? Because I can tell you this has happened to me, and you can pick a passage that you want to read. It doesn't matter what, like maybe Psalms 26 or Proverbs 5, whatever it is that you want to make it. And if you read that consistently for 30 days, every single day, you will get a different meaning from some of those words. And it seems to tack into, like I do my meditation and prayer. I try to do it in the morning. Yeah. And it kind of sets me up for the day. And I can tell you that when I do that, those scriptures will change on a daily basis as my life changes on a daily basis.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And so it's not like a static book where you just read Jack went up the hill. Jack went up the hill. Yeah. No, it changes. It changes. And so it's just very, very cool. And God will illuminate. He illuminates words to you somehow, like they look bolder, or you just pause.
I love that.
Yes. And so it's a living book, and it's just, to me, the coolest book in the world to read. And I didn't always feel that way.
Because, I know it's hard for me.
And I want to share this with our listeners, that, like the old King James version, which was like an original version. And it talks about thee and thou shalt nots and thou cans and thou canst. And
Yeah.
that's too much for me. Like I tried to read that and I just put it down because it was like, this doesn't even make sense to me. Right.
Yeah. Right.
But in our world today, there has been so many different types of Bibles published.
Right.
And the Living Translation happens to be one of my favorite. And what it does is it simply has a 2021 commentary under the scripture. So it
I
takes
love
that
that.
scripture and puts it in today's language so you can actually read it to understand what it's saying. And when people say, well, the Old Testament's so antiquated. Well, the old and the new interpret each other. So you
Yeah.
have to have both,
Right.
right? And then there's 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where Jesus Christ himself is talking. So it's just the most fascinating history book, if you like history, to ever be. And you can, if you get a new Living Translation Bible, you'll figure out what's modern day Turkey, what's
Right.
Iran, what's Iraq. And it takes you back to Palestine and all of those places 2,000 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Our world hasn't changed.
Interesting. No.
Yeah,
And in
it's
fact,
very cool.
I took the Bible as literature in high school, and my son took the Bible. He has his Bible here in Beverly Hills High School, and it's got notes in there about the historical parts of the Bible. They weren't really into but
Yes,
the
that's
history
right.
book of the tribes of Israel leaving the bondage of slavery from the Egyptians. But
Right.
I came up with something on my own, which it's hard to wrap. A lot of people go, when I talk about the Bible, they go, don't talk about the Bible. And I want them to understand that it's such a universal, wonderful tool to understanding human life today. But the Old Testament, you cannot really fulfill those commandments without the New Testament, the law of love.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it says, thou shalt not kill. Why? Because you love your neighbor and your brother and your wife. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Why? Because you love your wife. I mean, Christ brought the law of love, which is so healing. It's
Right.
the healing balm of everything. It's the balm in Gilead, you
Yes.
know?
And you know what else too? I think that for the longest time, I looked at those 10 commandments and thought to myself, you can't do this, you can't do that. It was like this big deal, right?
Yeah.
And it's really not. What it is parameters to keep us as human beings safe and secure.
Right.
You said, thou shalt not commit adultery. Why? Yeah, because you love your wife. But also, if you step out of those bounds, especially in today's world, you can get diseases that will
Yeah.
never go away.
Right.
You can be murdered because you've made somebody so angry and jealous.
Right.
There are things that can happen to you as a human being that if you overstep that command, puts you in danger. And all those 10 things do is try to keep us very safe in the middle of the road, in the middle of love. That's it.
Exactly. But
That's
think
it.
about us. Think about drug addicts and alcoholics. No matter how many rules there are to not do something, we did it anyway. It's like
Yes.
human nature is those
Yes.
rules are there, but we're gonna screw it up somehow, and then we're
Yes.
gonna be set back with the GPS, which the beautiful God guidance to get back on track, to get
That's right.
to divine alignment. At any moment of the day, we can start over. We're
That's correct.
always renewed. We can start fresh, no matter what happened yesterday.
That's
That's
right. And when I look at it, and I mean, I make mistakes on a daily basis.
yeah.
And it is what it is. I mean, I don't sugarcoat that for anybody. I wish I could have one day where I can say, "Oh my goodness, I made it through that entire day without screwing something up."
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just
right.
doesn't happen, right? But here's what I know. You're right. We get to restart our day at any given point. My life is so much better today than it used to be. I spent 27 years chasing, running, looking, waking up in the morning. Where's my next drink? Is there a butt left over in the ashtray that I can smoke?
Mhm.
I've done it all. And I look at myself now and I'm just like, that was such, at the time, it seemed like a glamorous life, right? And now I look at my life and I feel so clean and pristine and not proud. I mean, I'm not prideful and not better than, just internally clear,
Me too.
clear. If you call me
Wow.
today and say, Darlene, I need you to be with me on the West Coast by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I can make it happen today.
Oh yeah.
Back then,
Right.
I would have said, oh, okay. And I would have had a few more drinks and fell asleep and forgot you even called me.
Oh Oh God, me
right?
too. I missed a flight to Rome. I missed a flight to Rome. I missed different important events. Oh my gosh. I actually I actually didn't show up for a play I was starring in because I was doing cocaine for 3 nights with a famous producer, and didn't show up for my own play, which caused the director to quit show business altogether. I mean, I always turn these things into comedy, but at the time, I don't know how I lived through that. It was like
Wow.
that guilt of, destroying someone else's entire life and their career.
Wow. Yeah.
Woo!
Yes, we've been there, different levels, different levels of how it's happened, but absolutely.
Yeah, like you said,
Absolutely.
you didn't show up for somebody's. That is, my sponsor last night talked about a story about a guy he kept putting off, and the man kept saying, "Can I go fishing with you?" And he didn't want him to go fishing with him. He was annoying. He didn't want him to tell his silly, boring stories in the car, but he was a good friend. And he would say, "I'm kicking off to the mountains to go fishing," and this was in some beautiful place. And every year he kept saying no for 2 years in a row, and the man died the following November. And he had to, his sobriety brought back, he was able to get through that with the grace of God, with prayer and love and getting sober. But he was so self-centered. And I found myself to be so much less self-centered lately. I mean, I'm still have a little bit of residual effect of that, but I'm always thinking what I can do for my partner, how I can make him happy first,
Yes.
I'm thinking of other people and I'm praying for them, and I have compassion for others. And I don't think I was raised with that at all. I was into survival only, survival skills. Me, 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 me.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of how we all are at a certain point. And it's just nice to get to this side and to be able to be doing something like this, like a podcast that, my greatest prayer, my greatest hope is that this reaches a lot of people and people that need to hear it and
Yeah.
people that need to understand that. I just want to back up for 1 minute because we were talking about how these God shots happen. And this was a great God shot for me early on in recovery. So my best friend of 40 years who has since passed, she was in prison, and she was in prison for gambling
Mhm.
because she had just squandered like $800,000, and all of the law enforcement, her family, they were just trying to save her from herself, right? So
Mm.
she became incarcerated because she basically stole somebody's identity. And while she was in there, I had started into AA. So best friend for a long time, she's in jail. I'm starting into AA, right? And this was
Yeah.
like crazy. So every day she would call me collect, and I would take the call. And it was so funny because unbeknownst to either one of us, because we were in separate places completely, I started watching a minister on TV. She started watching the same one.
Mm.
And when we got to talk, it was like, how did that come into your realm? I'm like, I don't know. I turned the TV on one day and it was never a channel I watched. And there she was, this woman. And I sit down to watch it and it captivated me. So the next day I sit down and I turn on my TV and there she was, same time. And I watched it. My girlfriend was doing the same thing. And we both kind of came to this release, surrender, pivotal change in our lives at the same time.
Oh my
So
God, I
weird.
love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Those little breadcrumbs.
It was very cool thing.
Oh my God.
So
But you brought up real quick. I just want to go back to the word illuminate. You said that if you read the Psalm, if you read certain things every day, certain
different
words will
words
be
will
illuminated.
yes.
I had an experience of back when I had a really crazy case with a stalker, and I've written a hilarious true crime series about this. But we were trying to. I suddenly looked at an email, and I had to go to court the next day and prove to the judge that this man was hacking from the wrong IP address. And I don't know anything about technology. You couldn't even get me to understand the first thing about computer language. But I'm reading the email, and it's suddenly something became illuminated, like the show Numbers. This number popped out at me, and I wrote it down. And I go, "It's interesting. What is that?" It's an IP address he's writing from.
Oh,
Turned out to be he was hacking himself and trying to pretend like other people were hacking him. And I proved it, and the judge went, "Yes, and that IP address comes from Glendale, which is right where he lives." It was so bizarre that when I was in a state of just praying all the time, surrendered, I went through probably my worst things in life happened after I got sober and surrendered, but I was laughing at them all. I was able to get through crazy, a con artist husband and forgive him and love people and get through a lot of craziness in life after I had my big awakening, which is,
Yeah,
I couldn't have navigated any of that when I was drunk. I probably would have been dead. But it was
right.
kind of cool that you could even get through court cases and things. Right is right. And when you're right, good is on your side. And
Absolutely.
you know, when you're not
Absolutely.
lying, cheating, and stealing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the life of somebody that's actively using, that's what we do. And I'm not saying that anybody, I'm talking about myself too.
Yeah.
We lie to feel better about ourselves. We lie to cover up things that we've done.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so lost and then we're found. It's like
Exactly.
I once was lost and now I'm found. And that comes from Amazing Grace,
I love that. That's what I was
that
once,
song.
yes.
So
I
it's
was
just
once
really
blind,
fabulous.
now I can see.
Yes. Yes. And that's exactly what happened to me. And it's just so beautiful to be able to see you and be
Yeah.
part of this. And I wouldn't change this for the whole entire world.
This is
You know?
incredible. This is the beginning of our show, and we're gonna start having guests on, and we're gonna figure out a way to have a phone line to have callers call in with their God shots.
Cool.
So that will all be coming up in the next few months or
Awesome.
weeks. And I'm gonna see you in California, I hope.
I
soon.
know. Soon. I'm hoping.
Can't
Yes.
wait.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So,
this is
but
our show
anyway,
for today. Love you.
love you too. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a great time tonight with your sponsee.
Thank you. See
Okay.
ya.
God bless you.
Bye.
Bye.